My name is Jordan Little, and I'm going to start out by telling you guys just a little bit about me. So I was born and raised here in Ogden, Utah. I was the Sterling Scholar in the business department for Bonneville High School. And while I was in high school, I had the amazing opportunity to do a fundraiser for two of my friends. They both needed a double lung transplant because they both had cystic fibrosis. And through these fundraisers, I was able to go out and talk to the community and do a lot of events, not only to raise money for them, but also to raise awareness about organ donation and the importance that it has, not only on individuals, but on families and on communities, and how it makes such a big impact on so many different people. And I think that's kind of what brought me here today, actually. So having this first-hand experience with James and Rex, my two friends that needed a transplant, was really interesting and really special, because I'd go up to the hospital and I'd see the way that they interacted with their nurses and their doctors and their respiratory therapists. And I would just sit on the couch and I would think, one day I want to be like these people. I want to care for people and I want to help people get better. And that's what jump-started my career as a healthcare provider in the medical field. I really saw the need for passionate caretakers. And not only that, but it also gave me a passion for organ donation as well. So I know Intermountain Donor Services is a nonprofit community service organization. You guys service Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and Nevada. So there's about 100 hospitals that you guys cover, a little bit less than 100. And there are 4 transplant centers. The main goal is the recovery and transplantation of organs and tissues, but you guys also focus on raising community awareness for organ donation as well. I really liked when I was reading the mission statement how it said one of the missions is to help facilitate meaning and healing to donor families through the generosity of their loved ones' gifts. I thought that was such a cool thing to include in the mission statement. Working in the ICU, I think I see this a lot. We don't see very many donors, but the ones that we do see, I think a key factor with these patients and with their families is building connection, building trust. And I recently had the opportunity to do that in my job as well. So we had a patient that transferred from a less serious unit down to the intensive care unit unexpectedly with respiratory distress. And as the nurse was leaving, the nurse that gave us report was leaving, she said, "And by the way, his wife is in your waiting room and she's scaring people because she's crying and she's a little bit hysterical, so you guys should deal with that." Which I agree, we should. So I went into the waiting room, and we had a really full waiting room at the time. There were a lot of people back there, and I found this patient's wife, and I pulled her into a consultation room instead of the waiting room where it's a little more private, and I asked her what was going on and how she was feeling. And then I assured her that even though no one wants to go to the ICU, that's not a fun place to go. But if you do have to go to the ICU, then you're in good hands. We're very good at our jobs. We are very well trained. We have the best team. If I had to go to the ICU, I would definitely choose ours, because there's no one else in the world that will care for your loved one better than we will. We are phenomenal at our jobs, and we'll do everything that we can, and we'll keep you informed. And just this small empathetic touch, just letting her express her concerns and then listening and then comforting her a little bit with the knowledge that we are very, very good at our jobs, that was all that this patient's family member needed in order to collect herself a little bit. And that made such a big difference, just that empathetic touch, just being there for somebody and being willing to listen makes such a big difference. This patient turned out to be okay, and we didn't have any complications after we managed the respiratory distress. But it doesn't always go that easily. Sometimes things go wrong. Last year, for example, we had a patient that had a GI bleed, and unexpectedly, they started having blood come up past their intubation. It started coming out their nose. They were just massively hemorrhaging. So we started a massive transfusion protocol. It was an all hands on deck sort of situation. I was one of the caretakers that had the opportunity to run from our ICU down to our blood bank and back and forth to make sure that they had all the blood products that they needed. But on top of doing that, I was also able to assist with the transfusion process in the room and double checking the bags and helping other techs. And between running back and forth between the ICU and down to the blood bank, I was able to do other things as well. And I think our team just displays such phenomenal teamwork that it really helps us to produce high quality work when we're under such stressful situations. Another time, since then, we had a patient that lost their heartbeat, and so we called the code blue. We started compressions, and it was really helpful to have such an amazing team with us. So we were taking turns with compressions. No one goes longer than 2 minutes. We were taking turns in the room. We would step out of the room for a second if we got too tired, because we always say that the first heartbeat you check when you go into a code blue situation is your own. If your head isn't in it and if you're not able to think clearly, then you're not going to be able to perform your job the way that you need to. So you need to stay calm and collected in order to do your job correctly. So I think clear communication really helps us to produce quality work when we're under pressure, and knowing that we have a team that's willing to help us and we can ask questions, and everybody knows their role and everybody has a job and everybody is flexible and willing to move around and willing to do whatever it takes in order to make sure that the patient's outcome is as successful as it can be. And that teamwork really is very beneficial for us being so successful in our ICU. I think I started getting experience multitasking like we do in these situations a couple years ago when I was a med tech in an assisted living home. So I was a morning med tech, which means I had to give medication out to residents before they would go down to the dining hall for breakfast. It's a really tight crunch. Normally we have 2 hours to do a med pass, but these mornings we only had 1 hour because then it'd be breakfast time. We don't serve medication in the dining hall. Anyway, so I was the team lead at the time. As the med tech, I was the team lead. And one of my goals as the team lead was to make sure that my CNAs felt like they were taken care of and then they had everything that they needed in order to do their job correctly. So in order to make sure that we were all going to be successful, I would help my CNAs to get the patients up out of bed, and they would help me too, because it's easier to give medication when your patient's sitting up and not all groggy and laying down, and it's just easier for everybody. So we would make a plan, and as I was doing my med pass, when I would get to a room, I would call them, or when they would get to a room where I had to administer medication, they would call me, and we would just help each other out, and that was very beneficial for both of us, for all of us. I would also help our kitchen staff as well, because there were some residents that instead of going down to the dining hall, they would eat up in their rooms. So when I was ready to give those residents their medication, I would bring a warm tray of food with me and then give them their medication at the same time. And that was helpful for our kitchen staff, and that was helpful for the patients too, because they got warm food at the same time they got their medication. It really just helped everyone out, including myself. But at this job, I was also very passionate about what I was doing, and I loved the work that I was doing. And it wasn't uncommon for me to be very flexible with my schedule. There were days when I would work 16-hour shifts instead of 8-hour shifts, just depending on the needs of the unit. And there's a lot of times that no matter where I am, as long as I'm capable and willing to go the extra mile or stay the extra hour in order to make sure everything gets taken care of and everything's done correctly. I currently have the flexibility in my schedule right now to do that as well, which is really nice that I have that flexibility right now, and that I'm willing to work any shift. And I think having a passion for my job also helps me to maintain that drive to want to help my company so much. I remember back when one of my friends, so Rex was one of my friends that needed the transplant, and he was unable to receive his double lung transplant before he passed away. And I remember when Intermountain Donor Services sent us a little thank you note, a letter in the mail, and just said, because of your donation, this person's able to see again. And it was just like the most like amazing experience, and it was so helpful in the healing process. It didn't come for a little while after he died, but it was a very joyous moment, and it really did bring a lot of like peace and closure to his death. And I think if I was to explain the importance of tissue donation to a potential donor family, I would probably say something along the same lines, since I've experienced it too. Not only is it a light in a dark tunnel for somebody else, but it also gives them a choice in a situation where they have no say. So with the organ donors that I've seen in the ICU since working at McKay, a lot of the times it's accidental, it's not expected, people aren't prepared for it. And so just giving people the option to say, like, this is the situation and I can't do anything about it, and giving them a choice and letting them do something or decide something is such a huge opportunity, and it can be so helpful in the healing process too. Like the mission statement says, it's a potential to help with the healing process, and it really does. It does help a lot. I would say also that the work environment that I'm the most productive and happy in is one where all of my teammates or my coworkers are striving for excellence, and we push each other to do better. I've always worked in jobs where it's pretty independent. You do your work and no one really supervises you, but it's also very interdisciplinary. So at the same time, you're communicating everything that you're doing to someone else, and they're communicating with someone else, and there's a lot of steps that go into everything and a lot of changes, and it's just really important to have really good, clear communication and expectations. I used to work for the Color Run. I was an on-site store manager for the Color Run. We did event execution. And I just remember sometimes that job would be so stressful. Like, we had 10 to 100,000 people at races. I only was on one race where we had 107,000 participants, and that was crazy. But I remember, like, some of these events, it was just so loud, and we communicated everything by walkie-talkies. So if your walkie-talkie battery died, or if it wasn't talking very well, it was just so hard to communicate any of your needs. And if there was a problem, it was hard to let people know. And it was a loud environment too. Like, there's thousands of people shouting and having fun, and it's hard to like hear everything at the same time. We had rules for the walkie-talkies, like walkie-talkie etiquette. You know, you'll say somebody's name, and then you'll say copy. But like the communication just kind of lacked, and it didn't help that every week you would go to a different state or you'd go somewhere new, and everyone on the team was new too. But the walkie-talkie, like not having a clear channel of communication, really made that job a little bit more stressful than it had to be. We were always very successful with all of our events, but sometimes that lack of communication right there was hard. And during that job, whenever I would get super stressed, because I would be my store lead, and then I would usually have an assistant with me, and then we would have 4 or 5 volunteers working underneath us. But whenever I would get stressed, it was always helpful for me if I went into our back tent, and while I was grabbing something, I just did like 2 or 3 deep diaphragmatic breaths, and I just like came back to the moment, and I relaxed a little bit, and I really like just got back into the flow of things. So if it was too stressful, I would just take a breath, let it go, everything's okay. And that's something that I carried on with me in other jobs too, just taking a second to come back to myself, and kind of like we say in Code Blue situations, the first heart rate you check is your own. If you're not in your head, you're not going to perform as well, and you need to be on the top of your game in order to do what you need to do for your job. But outside of work, I like to exercise. I don't necessarily like going to normal gyms, but I'll go kickboxing or I'll do aerial acrobatics, and I think that when you feel your body, it really does make such a huge difference in your mindset and the clarity that you have when you're doing everything else. I think on and off the job, I like to make lists. I make a lot of lists, and I color coordinate, and it's fun. But if I have a lot of things that I'm trying to do at once, and I'm afraid I'm gonna forget something, I'll just like jot it down really quick, and then I'll never forget it. And it's always nice to know, like, hey, I did everything and everything's done when I get to the bottom of my to-do list. And it's always easy to add to. I think that is everything that you guys wanted to know, but if you have any further questions, go ahead and send me an email. But for now, I think that's it.